Today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss on very important topic. Our topic is global collaboration village. You know that World Talent Economy Forum. Beside this dialogue, we are taking action. We are working with Miresharai Economic Zone. We are working with Lokhipur. We are working with Dhaka, as well as we are working with Sylhet. These are the four zones we are developing, uplifting 8 million people. And our target, we want to develop 15,000 entrepreneurs next 7 years. Right now, we already developed 250 entrepreneurs. So that's why our today's dialogue is very important. I'm sure our entrepreneurs, those who join in our ecosystem, they will learn a lot of things from today's dialogue when we discuss about global collaboration village. Beside that, I want to give special thanks different different reason parliament members, those who are supporting our initiative, those who give us opportunity to develop business lab, and inviting all of the good corporations to integrate it with the local community. First, I would like to give chance Professor David Smith. What do you think about global collaboration village?
The concept behind a global collaboration village is very good. I'm assuming that we're talking about the one that was announced at Davos in 2022, that was looking at how to use the power of the metaverse to grow and really diversify participation of the various members and the various countries as they begin to deploy an active version of the global collaborative village, which is really to leverage new technology to help shape innovation solutions across the entire world for critical global challenges. At Davos, they're developing it in collaboration with Accenture and Microsoft to build this global collaboration village as a virtual form. And that's what's really interesting about this, as a virtual future for public-private contracts and public-private cooperation. And it's going to involve different spaces in their metaverse application of the global collaboration village that will provide very immersive spaces and very flexible spaces where collaboration can happen, where shareholders can meet, create, and take action against what they envision as some of the world's most pressing challenges. And it's really funny because as you look at this, they are trying to be an early stakeholder, because the metaverse is in its early days, as we know. But as we've talked about in this program, it already holds great promise, not only defining how organizations of all type work. We talked about the industrial metaverse. We've talked about the private metaverses. We've talked about enterprise metaverses. So it's redefining how organizations work and interact, but also with the goal of the global collaborative villages, it's trying to look at different ways to foster effective public-private partnerships, and not just purely private public-private partnerships, but how to involve the entire ecosystem as we're doing those, and how to pull that together in a technopolis type of approach, where you combine academia, the government, the citizens, and the private companies together to work together. And this particular instance will combine global stakeholders from international organizations, government, companies, and civil society organizations, NGOs, to try to imagine alternate futures. And to, again, like I said earlier, to do this in an immersive way where it is. Most of this is to create global cooperation, and in this area to try to be able to see what are some of the new approaches that can be enhanced where collaborative, cooperative solutions can be found. They want it to be very interactive, very inclusive, and that's one of the advantages of having a global metaverse. But on the other hand, they also want it to have great impact, and they want to use it to work to catalyze more effective individual and collective action uh, following to put it together and work on it. So there's a lot more as you can begin to look at it in this forum, but it is a great step by a group outside of the last couple of Davos meetings, trying to use these new advances in collaboration in metaverse and creating digital worlds to bring innovative and creative new approaches to, as they say, trying to solve some of the world's most pressing challenges. So, Sharif, I think that kind of gets us into it.
Excellent. Professor Rob.
Well, as we talked yesterday, the part of the metaverse that isn't working at the moment is the social metaverse. It's the concept of using the metaverse for collaboration, and that's the technology that we're using for these global villages. The difficulty and my concern is we tried online voting as well. We tried online voting at the beginning of the 2000s, and it went very badly. At that time, banks weren't online, the technology wasn't ready. So we had a number of places try online voting, and of course it broke. It wasn't ready. Now, 20 years later, how many people are online voting? Well, nobody. We fixed all the problems, but people don't trust online voting because of that experience in the early 2000s. Right now, with regard to the social metaverse, this idea of using the metaverse for collaboration, the technology isn't ready yet, and people aren't ready yet either. You have to have a fairly heavy prosthetic put on your head, the VR, normally VR goggles, so they also have AR implementations. But both implementations require you to use a prosthetic headpiece, and people don't like them. In fact, going all the way back to where 3D TV and 3D movies kind of failed a couple decades ago, the people didn't even like wearing glasses that were prosthetic in nature, that had no other utility other than watching the programs, and they were relatively light compared to the headgear that we have to use to go into the metaverse. Now there are two potential fixes. One, we do have the technology to make the headsets a lot better. The Varjo headsets adjust for your eyes, reduce significantly the opportunity for motion sickness, and provide a far better experience, but they're expensive, running between $3,500 and $5,000 a headset. And so people don't buy them, and so they don't become comfortable with them. They don't use them for other things, and the end result is they find when they use them for these social interaction events, they don't enjoy it because they're not used to the headsets. And number two, the interaction between the people and the virtual world is suboptimal. Originally, you had to use a keyboard or some kind of gaming controller to do the interface, and that didn't work all that well. And then we evolved to put cameras in the units, so we could scan the hands, but that only works if the hands are in view of the cameras, and so you end up doing stuff with your hands up here in front of your face, which is by no means natural, and still the level of resolution and accuracy is suboptimal. It doesn't feel like you're using your hands. It does feel like you're using some kind of construct. And again, people aren't comfortable with it. If you have to do it, they'll do it. And areas where it clearly is working is when you're trying to repair a piece of equipment or you're going through training. But for interaction, where you might be in the room for an hour or 2 hours working on a project, it gets pretty old. And so that hasn't been done. Meta worked on that latter part, but you saw them just go through millions upon millions of dollars, and they get pounded in the stock market for doing it, because after it's all done, it's still not cooked yet. And so we have to do one of two things, and maybe both of them. One, we need to get people comfortable with the technology the way it exists. And number two, we need to improve the technology so the use of it is more comfortable, so the user isn't turned off by using it. Now, those are the two technical things. We have a couple of social problems that we have to deal with here as well, which goes back to the beginning of video conferencing. And that's that people that are remote don't feel that they're engaged in the process. The kinds of things that occur after the collaborative event, or even on the side of the collaborative event for people that are there in person, are not available to the people that are there remotely. So if you go to an event physically, you can have easy side conversations with the person sitting next to you. You can meet with them in the hallway. You can go grab lunch with them if you want to have a chat with them, or dinner with them afterwards to discuss anything that couldn't be discussed in the meeting or while you were working on the project itself. If you're remote, your options are a bit different. Yeah, you could call them after the meeting and have a discussion. You could get into a virtual conference with them. You could go into a separate room, but it's not just like walking around the corner. It's not as easy as turning your head and having a chat. You'd have to bring up another app or another window or some other construct, like using your phone to make those conversations. And we don't train people to do this. We don't make them comfortable with doing this, and the end result, it doesn't get done. And so the people that are remote feel like they're not getting the same kind of experience as the people that are in person. And the end result is it kind of becomes a status thing. If you have adequate status, then you can go in person. If you don't have status, then you attend remotely. And that creates another problem, because then everybody wants to attend in person, if just to get that status aspect, let alone the other aspects that I spoke about. So in the end, we have a number of things we have to address here. And my concern is if we continue to push this stuff before it's ready, much like voting, people will get turned off on it. And then when we have it all cooked, they still won't want to use it, because they've got that initial negative impression that they built up over the years, that even though the technology can now do what it is they want them to do, and they might even enjoy it, they resist it because they remember that prior experience that was suboptimal. So I'm not as convinced this is going to work. During the pandemic, where people were forced to engage remotely and couldn't travel, that worked. When you don't have a choice, then the thing that you're given is how you get things done. But with the pandemic easing, well, it's not really easing, but with the pandemic rules easing, people can meet in person. And I'm noticing pretty much across the gamut now, some in-person meetings in the tech sector are spinning up, and these virtual meetings are spinning down and being reduced for those very reasons. And that's just for Zoom meetings, let alone the virtual reality meetings that we're talking about, which require a much higher level of technology and 4 more things to be in place to make them work. I mean, these Zoom things, these Zoom-like things, are working reasonably well now. But even so, they're for the social aspects that I mentioned, they're not holding. And even though the economic advantage and physical advantage, because pretty much every time I go on a trip I get sick, the physical advantage, the economic advantage, they're a ton cheaper than putting people on planes. Our pronounced behaviors is starting to flip back to the way we used to do things, and the metaverse stuff for social interaction is nowhere near as cooked as these video conferencing programs, which have been in place for decades. And only if you look back at the modifications to them aren't as great as you might think. So in the end, I think it's a good idea. I think if we're going to make this work, we really need to incent people to use the technology in their regular life more heavily, and certainly in their regular business life, to get them more comfortable with it. And then we still have to close the gaps. We still have to find easy ways for people to discuss socially in events like this, so that their engagement is not just in the tool. And we need to better instrument people so that the use of these tools is more natural and elegant. And then I think people will be much more willing to use them, and we can mature the product. In the end, we often go after quantity over quality, and it bites us in the butt. Our emphasis with these tools should be much more qualitative in nature. We should set a bar that's high enough that it makes the tool work well, and then work for the bar. And then once we meet the bar, then we expand the technology. We shouldn't be doing this early stuff so aggressively, because if we do, we'll turn people off on these efforts. And these kinds of things are incredibly important, because not everybody can travel. And certainly if you want to have an ad hoc collaboration, being able to do it virtually means you can do it almost instantly, where if you have to fly people in, it could take 2 or 3 days, if not weeks or months, to get everybody together, which pushes the project by that much time. pushes the project back by that much time and makes it far more inefficient. So it's important we go in this direction, but we have a sequence, and that means with the sequence is we make the tool adequate first, and then we roll it out. We don't roll it out and then hope that the tool will mature while we're using it, because often what happens is people then reject the tool and then they don't come back.
Thank you. Professor Jyotirmoy Goswami, can you hear? Professor Jyotirmoy?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, we are discussing on global collaboration village. I know you are working with many villages in South Asia. So how you want to collaborate with the global communities, and what is the impact of collaboration in your village?
I don't know exactly how the global people can get connected with this mission we are going to start, or we have already started in countries like India and Nepal, and going to start in Bangladesh, and maybe in few more countries of Africa. We can start like this from the grassroots level, how to make a bottom-up approach for addressing three major issues like crisis in environment, employment, and agriculture, through generating self-reliance. So it is a very much ground down to earth work, and we are trying to involve the whole society in such a populous country like India, and where a traditional human relationship is still there in spite of everything which is segregating us, which is making us isolated. The modern civilization has so much things to connect us as well as to disconnect us, alienate us. So there is that there is some sort of ambivalence, or some sort of, I should say, I don't want the right word, I can't use the right word right now. Anyway, it is there is some sort of problem within this system, but we are not going to talk about the problem. We are going to talk about the solution. So, how we can connect the whole society in some way or other, and the whole education system, how it can be connected with that. We are going to start from the school as well as with the grassroots society. We have already self-help groups of mostly of women's, and in Bangladesh, self-help group started doing so many things. In India also, in other countries, maybe in Nepal, it is they are in namesake. Anyway, in India also, it is not doing so much. There was a big sound of creating so many things, but they are remaining without doing almost anything. How we can actually can do something with them, with the existing self-help groups, and how each and every student can be a part of it, while there is one uh, book bank. Side by side, we are trying to develop a concept of seed bank, how the students can start singing and dancing with seeds and saplings. Just we are going to actualize it in a very concrete way. But doing this, we are going to promote natural farming in lieu of in place of industrial farming. We are going to promote that is agroforestry, and we want to have our food security almost from 20 to 50% of our food security from food forest. That will be the order of the future. If we make a delay, then it will be a very problem within a few years, not decades. Food security, food scarcity will be worldwide. There were food scarcity for several centuries. Now it will be, and we met anyhow. Now it will be very fierce all over the globe. Who World Health Organization is premonishing us that it is on the way. So we have to take some steps to no. So we have to take steps. So security from food forest is is a must. So and how to make it done is still in country like India, so populous country. There is 25% of land is still lying vacant. How we can make the utilization of that land while we can promote agroforestry at least in the existing agricultural land, farmland. Maybe it can be 10% of agroforestry there, and other unutilized land is there 25%. If we can start 20%, at least 10%, then all together it could be 20% of land would be covered with food forest. So in that way, we can we can address the crisis in food security, and also connect the people with each other where no one was getting anything. We are trying to make available for each and everyone at least something. So this is not only an intervention of industrial intervention, or I should say technological intervention, or artificial intelligence intervention, but we are in an era of artificial intelligence. So that will be our duty to collaborate the two. We should not be that much stubborn. It is the modern society is creating some problem. There it is no doubt, but we are to utilize the modern tools. How to make it done? That would be a question to be solved by the persons who are expert in it. So there are people who are expert in it. We are to know what we are to do. We must know what we can do in the grassroots society. We know the AI, the intervention of AI all over the globe will make so much unemployment throughout the globe. So it will be our onus to do something at the grassroots level in actual world. How to make people earn their livelihood away from AI intervention. It can be utilized, but we are yet to know the technology, how to collaborate between the two. If we introduce it without knowing anything, how to connect each and everyone at the grassroots level, at the bottom level, then it will be a grand failure. That is the crux of the modern civilization. We have got so much tools, but we don't know sometimes what to do with that. Monkeys have sometimes they can get some good things, some jewelry of pearls, but they don't know how to make use of them. But we are human. We must know how to use it, how to connect people, and how to make people involved in so much things. We are leaving people alone. We are isolating them. We are disconnecting them from each other, from the nature also. How to connect them with each other and how to connect them with nature so lovingly, it will be our duty to do it. And I will invite you all who are expert in all those things at the top level, particularly in the AI intervention. So I think you will all think over it. I am on the other part at the bottom level. If we are connected to each other and we can work together and think together, I think we will find the way. Anyway, thank you for listening.
Mhm. Thank you, Professor Jyotirmoy. World Talent Economy Forum always with this kind of initiative, and this is our objective. We want to support different kind of project, especially the grassroots level project, and I'm sure our global speakers also support this kind of project. Professor David Smith, what you want to add for today's very important topic for
So
global collaborations?
I love the vision you just got through telling us about. It is one that is very noble because you do have to involve the human capital. You have to involve all the different elements in the technopolis to be able to have the effects which you are striving to have there. Uh, Again, the technopolis is where you pull together the public and private and academic sectors to together to advance problems, particularly problems that are grand challenges. And some of them that you begin to talk about there are grand challenges. Uh, but if we look at also at the whole concept of the global collaboration village, we begin to understand that it does want to unite the people across the borders and it needs to be done cross borders because that is where the sets are. They're not within the borders of any one region or nation. And it needs to really support the exchange of ideas to be accomplished there. Like Rob, I think that the uh, judgment is still out on how effective the metaverse will be for doing these, much like the early days of, like we talked about yesterday with Second Life, how it was a great attempt, but not sufficient to get the job done. And while the internet and really the video conferencing, particularly because of the pandemic, has brought us together in virtual spaces, the human connection has been missing. I saw years ago a video conferencing system at Bell Labs that the screens were real size and the conference room table was actually built into the screen. And that's the closest, and every speaker had their own speaker in the remote room, so the sound came from them. That's the closest I've seen to really good human factor interaction. But, you know, instead of just trust and helping put the elements for collaboration in place, the internet actually has had the effect in many instances of increasing polarization. And we've also seen misinformation happen across these areas. And that is one of the things that a global collaboration village needs to change. You know, the advent of mass computer games has helped as we looked at some of the ways to do this, but the infrastructure costs are high. You have to have high quality, good bandwidth. You have to have machines capable of working in a virtual environment. And you know, as I often talk about, you have to look at the cybersecurity, the privacy, the regulatory impacts of doing this across multi nations. all those have to be solved as you look at how effective a global collaborative village can be. And while it's early in the implementation, it's good to start working on these and developing them and bring them up to fruition so that they can have an impact on today's global stage. And I love the emphasis on people of the last speaker. But the people are the ones have to do it, but you have to involve the organizationals as well. You have to involve the government as well because it's such an important part. And yes, as you begin to forge public-private partnerships where there's an exchange of resources and exchange of money, you have to involve the regulatory environment too, so that contracts you make there, whether they're smart contracts or others, are enforceable. And you have to look at how do you exchange resources in that environment. All things that many, many groups are working to solve today. And my hope is that we see more of these type of initiatives like the Global Collaboration Village started by large corporations and large NGOs, that we will increasingly see the standards that are going to be necessary for this to be successful going forward. So Sharif, I think that's some of my comments right now.
Yes, thank you. Professor Rob.
So as we look at trying to merge different concepts to the emerging economies, I think it's important to note that anything that the emerging economies are looking at in terms of technology, they should be looking at the next wave, not the current wave, and certainly not the past wave. So if we were looking at agriculture and fixing the problem with regard to not having enough food in a lot of nations, right now, you really have to look at the impact of global warming, because if you look at Central and South America, much of the existing farmland is no longer workable. Not enough water, past pollution, and bad management have resulted in a massive reduction in farm yields, and a lot of the climate refugees are from farming areas where the farms are no longer viable. And this means that if you're looking at fixing the food problem, you probably should be aggressively looking at things like vertical farming or factory farms to get around the impacts of climate change. You're not putting a bunch of resources in a mechanism that is not only obsolete now, because you can get far higher yields by using technology, but over a fairly short period of time, the way we're doing it now may no longer be viable. Even in developed countries, we're having serious problems. For instance, around me, there is now a constant problem with farms that are no longer viable because of lack of water. We're now in a heavy drought area, and we don't have enough water to support the farms we have. And so moving to a different technology, and aggressively moving to a different technology that will allow the food yields that you need. And vertical farms can be placed right in the community. So if you have a city, you can put vertical farms in the city, reducing the logistics required to get the food to the people. And also, if you have a major weather event or catastrophe like Turkey just had, you have a logistics problem, even if you've got food, getting to the people that need it. So by placing the food sources closer to the people, and certainly using construction technology that allow the structures to survive an earthquake or survive a weather event, then you better assure that food will be there when you need it during a crisis, as well as being there when you don't have a crisis. And so thinking through these aspects of solving the problem should allow the developing country to say, hey, let's jump the technology, let's move to where the developed world is going and get there first. That's true, by the way, across the board. Often what has happened in a developing nation is they're able, because a developed nation has to displace existing technology, and that has a cost. A developing nation doesn't have that cost. The technology isn't there to begin with. And so they can clean slate it. They can do it right the first time, as opposed to undoing what was done to do it right the second, third, fourth, or fifth time, which is more likely to happen in a developed nation. And by anticipating where the technology is going, and investing there, then they become an expert on that technology, and it is something that they can export and charge for. The skills they develop around it are valuable to other nations, even developed nations that have not yet deployed. And companies will flock to them as examples of how this is done correctly, also to learn how it was done. So it becomes less of an effort to hold out your hand and ask for funding and help, and more of an effort where other people are coming to you asking you for help because they don't yet understand the technology because they haven't deployed it yet. So in the end, by looking ahead at the technology and better refining it, you not only get a better benefit and avoid a lot of the costs of having to undo a bunch of things that were just done, but you have the economic benefit of becoming experts on where the technology is going, and thus people seek out your expertise as opposed to having to hire experts from much more expensive nations to do the same thing. So my advice is not spend a lot of time trying to work on now out of date technologies, and see if you can jump ahead and start working with firms that are on more the leading edge of technology, becoming expert in it, and thus being able to market that expertise to areas that have not yet come to these conclusions and have not yet decided to displace the old stuff with the new stuff. David, I think you're up. It looks like Sharif is frozen again. Either that or he's very good at standing still.
And those intense eyes too. I just love that look. Yeah, I'm very happy we're beginning to go through this topic. It's one that I think we need to see a lot more on. And you know, there are hundreds of millions of dollars being invested in the metaverse. You know, the projections are that the metaverse market will be $800 billion market by 2025. And we're seeing that really going out. And, you know, we need to see how this is going to play, like you said, Rob. How can we get out there and get ahead of this? And the Global Collaboration Village is trying to be a first mover in this space, and it's one that I think we can learn from and create other more effective ones even down the road. You know, will people be able to drive in it? Will they begin to move their conferences from the in-person meetings they have today? And will they be able to do this in this global collaborative villages? So maybe you do not have to fly into these meetings every year and have that working. And and will this let these meetings become more inclusive, where more larger delegations, particularly from developing nations, can attend and have a voice in their input? All of these are promises, I think, of this technology. And Rob, I like that earlier you reminded us of how the challenges of using some of this technology in voting were promised earlier but failed. And, you know, we're now beginning another round yet of trying to look and say, is maybe the metaverse the right place to go to a virtual environment for elections? Another thing to do that as of yet, but I am really hopeful that as we see challenges like this, they become the test beds that will let us advance that. And Sharif, I hope that we can use environments like this to take the entrepreneurs that you're creating in Bangladesh, to take the entrepreneurs that are being developed in the rest of the world, and let them begin to see what is their place in fitting into environments like this, where they can maybe go and experiment with theirs and create products that hopefully will grow into thriving companies, not only thriving companies, but companies that have an impact in tackling some of the critical challenges that this particular global collaboration village is trying to tackle. So I see the great promise there, Sharif, and how governments such as yours and academic institutions such as the ones you're associated with can begin to learn from this and implement their own versions of it and create new companies and uh, create new economic opportunities and create economic development for all the regions around the world.
Thank you. Professor Rob.
Yeah, I agree with David. The opportunity here is significant. If you can remove the travel requirement for engagement, particularly when you're trying to engage with experts who are often located in geographically remote places, you can do some pretty amazing things. And if you get people comfortable with using the tools, either the way they are or the way they will be, then it helps because the folks are more likely to use them. The issue, though, as I see it, is the developing world can't heavy lift this. They can certainly get ahead of the curve. They can certainly learn the technology and bring it inside, and then export that learning once they've got it. But driving the developed world to use the technology, which you have to do, if we're going to use it for collaboration, becomes problematic because the developed world has a much harder time moving between technologies because they've got to displace whatever came before. Plus, as I mentioned, we have a tendency to try this stuff out before it's ready, and we build negative impressions of it. One of the concerning things that happened recently, and I know why they did it, was Microsoft pretty much collapsing their entire extended reality organization and moving away from it. Not a good sign because they're the leading productivity tool vendor on the planet, and so the fact that they're stepping back and moving aggressively to generative AI instead is an indicator of change. And as we look at this, it may be that the right path, or the path the world will eventually take, is more of one where you use generative AI as proxies, as opposed to attending these things in person. And so your generative AI goes to the meetings, takes notes, lets you know when you have to contribute independently. And then you don't really have to attend physically or virtually. Your AI is doing it for you and keeping you linked in, so you can operate in an asynchronous fashion. Because one of the issues with regard to meetings and collaboration is you have both local and remote requirements. And so when somebody wants to put together a meeting across geographies, well, the people that you're trying to pull together, and they may already have different commitments that are local, and so you've got local and remote commitments fighting for each other, and that tends to put off the engagement. And when you put off the engagement, you slow the collaboration, and in a way, you kind of emphasize its reduced importance. And so, but if a generative AI avatar could attend in your stead, then effectively you can attend 1, 2, 3, 4 meetings at once. Now it doesn't necessarily matter whether you've got a conflict. Your avatar covers for you in the conflict, and you're only brought in on those instances when you need to contribute individually, and you can review the notes and commitments that are made. Hopefully, you're the one that made those commitments after the fact, and still move forward productively. So that there are, there's another wave coming through as we're talking about the metaverse. The generative AI wave is already starting to eclipse it. And while both can coexist, the generative AI element adds this concept of massive multitasking that none of the existing reverse video conferencing tools yet have, will shortly, but yet have. And again, if I was looking at implementing this, I would already be looking at, okay, how do we apply generative AI so that when we do the deployment, it's the deployment using a tool that uses this underlying technology, and we're ready for the future. We're not just finishing the deployment of a technology that is now obsolete after it has become obsolete. So anticipating the future is important here. And right now we're looking at a major influx of generative AI, which is going to have a major impact on how we do most everything. And if we don't take it into account, invariably we'll pick the wrong tools to collaborate with because they will not have this capability. And even when they get it, we won't be comfortable with using it. And the end result is the effort will likely fail. So working towards success and making sure that we're deploying and using stuff that will be relevant when we finish the deployment is incredibly important. And that means we always have to have our eyes over the horizon and making sure that what we're doing is going to be the right decision, not only today, but at the end of the process of deployment. So we suddenly don't look stupid by having deployed something that is in that time frame obsolete and incomplete. So this is the opportunity for emerging economy, because they don't have this legacy stuff they have to walk away from. They can build better for the future and be ready for the future that arrives. And when we talk about collaboration, assuring they're on the right path to the future and are assisting in it, and assuring that the future that they're building for actually occurs is also important. And so getting together collaboratively with other emerging economies so that they are a force to be reckoned with in terms of driving that future also becomes incredibly important. Otherwise, they'll always be at the back end of things trying to chase a future that they can neither see or nor adopt to. And that's pretty much why emerging economies remain emerging economies. They never get ahead of the curve. And the important thing here is you need to get ahead of the curve so you can own your own destiny.
You're muted, Sharif.
Thank you, Professor Rob. I want to share one of the good news from World Talent Economy Forum, that World Talent Economy Forum collaborate with B Lab Japan, and from the back, actually, we are getting collaboration from 750 corporation from Japan. So through this process, maybe we can share more technology, more innovation and research work with the emerging economy. Professor Rob, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
You mentioned Japan, and Japan's a really good example of a country that pivoted hard into the future. When they went into the Second World War, they were more of a legacy environment, feudal in nature. The government structure was archaic. Their technology wasn't particularly advanced. When they came out of the Second World War, there was a change. They changed their government structure. They changed the way they looked at the world. And in a relatively short period of time, they went from a technology laggard to a technology leader. And the world chased them. China, much the same way. If we go back to the time of the Second World War, they were in worse shape than Japan was technologically. And now they're challenging the U.S. For world leadership in technology. So the U.S. did pretty much the same thing as they came into the 1900s. They lagged Europe, and then of course by the end of the 1900s they led Europe. And so it showcases that if you take an aggressive stance on moving your country to a leadership position and make measured investments, you can move from a laggard to a leader. Though the long-term example is you kind of have to keep up the cadence, because once you move into leadership, you have to hold it. And you can see the United States is struggling at the moment to maintain leadership, as much like Europe struggled 100 years ago to hold on to their leadership. So you have to be aware of the cycle as well. But the initial cycle would be to look at Japan as a great example of what can happen if the population and government come together to build for a better future. South Korea, another example. I mentioned China as well. Singapore. These are all environments of Finland. That entire area, given the climate they're in, it's amazing how well they've done, not only for their industries, but for their people. And so looking out in the world and picking an example of how you want your country to be in the future. Who do you want to emulate? What's the environment you want to have? What's the balance you want to have between family and work, your work-life balance? What's the future you'd like your population to have, and build for that? I think the big mistake we often see, particularly with regard to governments, is they're highly tactical and they can't spell strategy, and the end result is they're constantly chasing little stuff, and they're not able to execute on the big stuff. And as we talked earlier, the big stuff is economic independence, food independence, making sure your people have clean water and medicine. These are all very important, and you can see the countries that are doing a fabulous job with regard to those areas. Perhaps they're the ones you want to collaborate with, much like you're collaborating with Japan, to really make a difference and learn from the mistakes and successes of the past to build a better future. We can do this. We just have to choose a path and execute. And David, I think you're up for closing remarks.
Rob, I agree with everything you said there, that we have to choose the path, execute it, look at how to put standards in place, look at how to be more inclusive as we look at the different elements of this. Also, we need to look at disinformation. We need to understand that we have to pull the human connection into these tools for them to ultimately be successful, and that we need to see what opportunities we can offer for the people around the world to see, understand, and really look at how we can imagine our world in a different way. And how can we begin to do this in a way for us to take the next steps in creating these virtual worlds, and these virtual worlds that are going to be so important as we move towards the future. I'm a little cautious as we look at trying to do too much in a virtual world. I can do a lot by using Zoom and Microsoft Teams and Skype and things like StreamYard to collaborate with people, but I still relish the in-person meetings. I believe I get more collaboration done face-to-face than I do in a strictly digital-only session. Now, we're seeing that changing gradually in the younger generations, and maybe I'm just too much of an older generation on this. But I think these are the tools that we have to use to move towards the future and to be successful in what we do in the future. Challenges, yes. Opportunities, immense. So that's really my final remark here, is for organizations that have not looked at things such as this global collaboration village or in other elements of the metaverse, particularly in the enterprise metaverse and the industrial metaverse, like we've spoke about before, go ahead and dip your toe into it. For entrepreneurs, look at the immense opportunities here. And what's very interesting for entrepreneurs is most of the tools to do this today are free. Most of them are open source. So it's areas you can get into with a moderate cost to begin to experiment and to begin to look at how to create your own place in the metaverse world and to make a difference in the physical world. And so that's really my concluding remarks. I hope Sharif does come back, Rob, or should we just go ahead? Wait a minute, there he comes. I thought he was coming.
And there he went. Speaking about technology that just works so wonderfully.
That's right.
And I still think you ought to ask for a refund on your fiber feed to your house.
Oh, I agree. The outages up here have been tremendously over the last week with our ice storm. But Dr. Sharif, the challenges we see with the connectivity even today is going to be some of the challenges you see in this future metaverse collaboration too. But with that, I have to jump off for a Teams call, and I appreciate all the opportunities, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor David Smith, and thank you, Professor. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.